Hey friends, it's Nick here. Remember this place? Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? In fact, on March 14th, it will be 1 full year since we closed our doors and moved everything in online, doing what we can to keep everybody safe and flatten the curve. And it's been quite the year, hasn't it? Yeah, it's been a really big year. So on March 14th, to honor that, we want to invite you to a special Sunday service. It'll be a time of grieving and lamenting all the hardships and loss that we've experienced, but also naming how we've grown, celebrating the fact that we are still here and looking ahead to what is next for us as a church community. So whether you are brand new or whether you have been here for the entire year, we want to invite you to this very special and important service. Join us for a time lamenting, grieving, celebrating, giving thanks, but also looking and stepping out into what is next. So March 14th, 10 o'clock, find us on YouTube. We'll see you there. It's going to be a great service of being the church together. Hey friends, welcome back to another Sunday service. Yeah, it's Sunday again. When did that happen? They just kind of sneak up on us, don't they? My name is Nick. I am the minister here at Red Deer Lake United Church. We are an affirming church that gratefully gathers on Treaty 7 land, and we are a community of people from all kinds of places, of all kinds of backgrounds and stories, of all kinds of colors, orientations, and beliefs and perspectives, but all kinds of people who come together to find in the way of Jesus a new way to be human and alive in the world. A way that's connected to God, each other, and ourselves. A way of life that is rooted in those divine rhythms of hope, justice, peace, belonging, wonder, awe, and truth. A way of life that transforms us, so we can then go out and transform the world, helping turn it into the one that God always wanted it to be. A world where everyone has enough and everyone has a place. Yeah, that is who we are. That is what we are all about. And I am so glad that you are here today for our Sunday service. Because it's going to be a good one. We have all kinds of great stuff coming up. What do we have? We have music, we've got prayers, we've got a spiritual practice about reconciliation, and we've got a sermon about that time Jesus went into the temple and totally destroyed it. We flipped over the tables, drove out all the animals. Yeah, we're going to ask, what the heck do we do with that? And what does it tell us today, right now, what it means to be human and alive in this world? I know, all kinds of great stuff coming up, so stick around for all of it. We want you to be here for all of it. But before we get into that, let's take a moment and check in. Go onto your computers or wherever you are watching this, find the comment box, and let us know who you are. Let us know how you're doing. Let us know where you come from. Because this is a way that we can be together, we can be in community, even though we are apart. It's how we can practice being in that affirming and inclusive and loving community, that thing that we strive to be and do together. So take a second and do that, and I'll let you know what we are going to start with. Because I don't know about you, but maybe you've had a week. Maybe it's not even a busy week. Maybe it's just one of those weeks where it feels like it's been a month. Or maybe even a year. Yeah, we all know what I'm talking about. I generally always feel that way, even though my body might be here, my mind's not here, my spirit is not here, my heart is not here, and I'm kind of living this fractured life. This life that, or I'm just kind of spread out over 18 months or 18 different thoughts and feelings. Yeah, anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I'm sure we all do. And the prayer we're going to start with is called a breathing prayer. It's exactly what it sounds like. And it's a prayer that's designed to help us come together, to bring all those parts back together, knowing all those parts belong here, that they are good, that there is room for them. And it's only when we're all together, when we are fully and wholly here, that God can really do God's thing of renewing us from the inside out. And so we're going to start with that to help us finish arriving. And so as we begin, take a second to finish commenting and checking in, and then be here. Do whatever you have to do to be here. Put your feet on the ground. Take a deep breath. Say, this is a good place to be. I am welcome here. And let's start with this breathing prayer to know that God is with us, that we do belong here, and that this is going to be a good time together. And so, my friends, as we begin, may peace be with you, and let's begin with a big, deep breath. Yeah, it's going to be good.
of life and awesome mystery, in your death we are reborn. Though you die in all of history, still you rise with every morn. Still you rise with every morn. Gentle Jesus, mighty Spirit, come inflame our hearts anew. We may all your joy inherit, if we bear the cross with you. If we bear the cross with you. In our call to be a blessing, may we be a blessing true. May we live and die confessing Christ as Lord of all we do. Christ as Lord of all we do. Living water of salvation, be the fountain of each soul, springing up in new creation, flow in us and make us whole, flow in us and make us whole.
So if you've been with us for the past few weeks, or maybe if you've been checking out some other churches, you've probably heard that we are in the season of Lent. And Lent for us here in the church, it is this chunk of time, this season of 40 days, where we're invited to do the really hard but really essential work of moving towards peace, healing, and wholeness. Lent is a season of transformation. It's when we take time to look at our lives, when we take time to look at our world, and we look for what is off, what's not quite right, what is that shouldn't. And we take this time and we really do that hard but essential work of mending the fences, of stitching together, of healing, of reconciling, of forgiving, of moving towards peace, healing, and wholeness, knowing that life is only life at its deepest and its fullest when we do that hard but essential work. And all throughout Lent here at our Sunday services, each week we're going to give you a spiritual practice. This thing that you can do, yes, together, but more importantly and more to the point, that you can kind of keep in your pocket and you can whip it out when you need it. You can kind of pay attention to what is going on within you and around you, and you can think, oh yeah, I know something I can do to help me out with this. I know something that can keep me rooted when I need some courage. Or I know something I can do when I'm feeling out of my body and I don't really love my body. You can keep these practices that we've taught you, that we've given you, and you can do them yourself to help you do that work and move again and again and again towards peace, healing, and wholeness. And this week, oh my God, this is one that I've had on our list, and I almost changed it because I don't want to do it because it's too hard, and I only kept it. Here's the reason why I only kept this one, because Antonina has prepared a piece of music about this. And I knew if I changed this, that would make all her work for nothing. And so we're going to do it. We're going to go ahead with this one, even though I'm going to guess you'll all be with me and you'll be like, let's just skip this one. Maybe we don't have to do this one. Because this one, the spiritual practice we're going to do, the spiritual practice of reconciliation. Yeah, reconciliation. Literally to bring back together. That's what we're talking about when we talk about reconciliation. It's the bringing back together two or more things that have been driven apart, that have been divided, and there is some space between. That's what reconciliation is. And I think that's why we have that initial reaction. We're like, ugh, I don't want to go there, because we all have things in our lives, maybe things around us, but definitely things within us, where there's some space between us, where there is this big chasm, maybe literally, maybe metaphorically, But we know there are things there, and we know how awkward it will be. We know how hard it will be. We know how painful it will be to go in and try to address that. So we just opt for the easy route and we say, yeah, let's do this later. Let's skip to something a bit more comfortable. Yeah, anyone with me on that? Yeah, I think that's why we have that reaction. But here's why we need to press into and through reconciliation. Because we are not meant to live in a divided world, and we're not meant to live divided lives. We don't have to live like that. We don't need to live like that. We shouldn't live like that. To live in a truly loving world and to truly love ourselves, it requires reconciliation, because reconciliation is how we get rid of that space and move towards peace, healing, and wholeness. But before we get into the practice, can we just name something? Let's name something really important. Forgiveness and reconciliation, two different things. Two completely different things, and not things that we have to do. Do you hear me on that? They're different. And sometimes we conflate them, and I think that can cause a lot of problems and turmoil. Because when we talk about forgiveness, what we're talking about is something we mainly do, maybe entirely for ourselves. It's that liberating gesture of love where we decide to put down our anger and our resentment and stop living in the past. Stop getting consumed by all that anger and frustration and woundedness and those desires to get even and seek revenge, and say, you know what? I don't want to live like that. That's a waste of my energy. It's done. I forgive you. I'm going to practice forgiveness. I forgive myself. I'm going to put that down because I'm sick of living like that. And we step into freedom. Reconciliation is something we do with someone else. It's the coming back together of things. And while we are called to forgive, I don't think we are called to reconcile. There can be people in our lives that we forgive, but we don't come back to be in relationship with. We're not called to be in relationship with. Maybe they hurt us too much. Maybe they caused some irreparable damage. Maybe they crossed that boundary one too many times, and it's just always exhausting every time we hang out with them. You know who I'm talking about? Yeah. Well, you are called to forgive that person. You don't have to reconcile with them. I don't think God calls us to be and stay in toxic, abusive, harmful relationships. That makes no sense to me. Why would a loving and just God do that? No, God wants us to forgive them because God doesn't want us to feel that way, get caught up in that. But we don't have to be in relationship with them. So when we talk about reconciliation, we're talking about the people or parts of us that we want to be in relationship with, that we want to be at peace with, that we want to be one with. And that's what we're talking about. How can we move towards someone we want to be? How can we get rid of that space that is causing us to live in a divided world or have a divided life? And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about reconciliation. And today for our practice, because this is such a long, hard, and complicated process that requires so much work, we're just going to do step one together today. And then maybe hopefully that will kind of help you do that work, that really essential work of getting rid of that space and seeking healing, seeking peace, seeking wholeness. And so today for our spiritual practice, while we sing a song, the thing I want you to think about and the question I want you to answer, the thing I want you to name is this. Who or what do you need to reconcile with? Yeah, who or what do you need to reconcile with? Because the thing is, we can't heal, we can't bridge the gap until we name it. It's only when we name it that we acknowledge that there is a space here. It's only then that we can actually begin the work of reconciliation. And sometimes naming it, acknowledging it, admitting it, sometimes that's the hardest part. Sometimes that's the thing that we have to do to begin this process. And so as we listen to this next song that our music team has put together, spend some time with that question. Who or what do you need to reconcile with? And I invite you to name it, to speak it out loud, to write it down, to put it in your phone, and name it as a way of committing to beginning that work. Of doing yourself the favor of saying, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to be divided. I don't want to live with this space. I don't deserve that. I don't want to live like that. And this is the first thing we can do to begin to mend the gap, to come together and do that beautiful and sacred work of reconciliation. And so, my friends, as you begin to do this process and figure out how you can get rid of that space between, knowing that this is good work, that this is important work, as always, may you struggle well, and may grace and peace be with you. So this week we honor International Women's Day. That day when we are invited to name, honor, and celebrate all the women of our lives and our world. But also remember that gender violence, gender discrimination, gender inequity, gender inequality is still very much a real thing. Not only in places far away, but also right here in Canada, right here in our own province, our own city, our own workplaces, our own churches, and even our own homes. And as an affirming church, as people who believe that God created all people equally, that God gave all people an inherent worth and value, and people who want to create a world where everyone has enough and everyone has a place, International Women's Day is really important to us because this is something that goes to the heart of our faith, the heart of our values. And this week, we're going to devote our entire prayer time to International Women's Day, to giving thanks for all the women in our lives and our world, but also recommitting to doing the work of standing up for and working alongside of women to making sure that we can end gender-based violence in our lifetime, here and now, and trying to create a world that is different from the one that we live in today. And so as we head into this time of prayer, let's remember that this is important. That this is not just something we can kind of name and move on, but this goes to the very heart of our faith, that this justice work is a part of who we are. And let's commit to praying and doing this work together. And so, my friends, knowing that this matters, let us come together and let us pray. Let's say this prayer together. God of grace, the world you created is good. Forgive us the inequity that divides. God of grace, the humanity you created is good. We confess our complicity in evil ways. Spirit of gentleness, source of all our being, channeled through a woman's birthing, we give thanks for the miracle that is birth and life. Spirit of gentleness, source of commonality and diversity, we give thanks for each woman, mother, daughter, sister, friend, neighbor, and those alone in the world. Spirit of gentleness, source of our energy and creativity, we give thanks for each wrong that has been righted, each voice lifted up, each stride towards justice. God of grace, you bless Sarah and Hagar, Tamar and Esther, Mary and Lydia, and it was good. Bless each of us now with living courage, relentless determination, and profound solidarity. Grant us wise deliberation, decisive action, and inclusive celebrations. That we will be part of braiding together your dream of abundant life, healing of the earth, and peace for all, and it will be good. So God, knowing you call us to be people of extravagant love, knowing you call us to be a movement of justice, we remember the prayer that your Son taught us to pray, and we say it together.
Our Mother who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
A reading from the Gospel according to John, chapter 2. It was nearly time for the Jewish Passover, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple those who were selling cattle, sheep, and doves, as well as those involved in exchanging currency sitting there. He made a whip from ropes and chased them all out of the temple, including the cattle and the sheep. He scattered the coins and overturned the tables of those who exchanged currency. He said to the dove sellers, "Get these things out of here. Don't make my Father's house a place of business." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Passion for your house consumes me." Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. God be with you. So we are about to get into the sermon, and for today's sermon, we're going to go visit that story we just heard. Yeah, that story. That wild story about Jesus going into the temple with a whip, and overturning the tables and driving everybody and everything out. Yeah, that story. Because it's quite the story, isn't it? It's intriguing, it's scandalous, it's violent. But the story, it's also super rich. It is super deep. There are all kinds of places we could go with this story. We could talk about holy mischief and the spiritual roots of civil disobedience. We could talk about, we could talk about passion. We could talk about how the fires we have within us, those things we are passionate for, will always lead us into and towards suffering. We could talk about how religion has this knack to becoming something that oppresses instead of something that liberates. Something that controls instead of something that frees. And we could talk about why that is and what we can do about it. Oh yeah, all kinds of places we could go. We could talk for days about this story. Which is how you know it's a good story, right? You know it's a good story when you read it and you are left thinking about all kinds of things. And I think that's why John begins his gospel with this story. I think that's why he puts it at the very beginning, because it sets up all kinds of really important conversations about who Jesus is, what he's about the kind of world that God wants to create, and about what it means to be human and alive in that world. Yeah, all kinds of places we could go. It's such a good story. And so today for our sermon time, for the conversation we're going to have, we're going to get into two things, two places this story leads us. And by the end of it, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, we will have ended up talking about a rhythm at the heart of what it means to be human, something that we have to do in order to be human. And we'll talk about the wildly hard but unavoidable question that this story asks us. Yeah, that's where we're going. But to get there, first we have to talk about two things. Not four things, two things. Two things that I think can help us understand what Jesus is doing in this story, but also two things that will help us get to those other things that we want to talk about. So those two things, to start off, let's have a conversation about form and spirit. Let's talk about form and spirit. And so in our tradition, when we talk about spirit, what we're usually talking about is the divine. We're talking about that sacred mystery. That's something bigger than ourselves, that source of life, that ground of our being, that living and holy presence, that thing, whatever humans have called it as we've grown and evolved in our consciousness of it. That thing that we feel compelled to be connected to. That thing that since the very beginning we have been driven to connect with. This thing that almost feels like we're meant to be one with it. That almost feels like we are a part of it. This thing that when we are connected with it, when we are engaged with it, we come alive in a whole new way. Our existence gets deepened and heightened. We discover a whole new way to be human and alive in this world. Yeah, that's what we talk about when we talk about spirit. But here's the thing that we have to keep in mind whenever we do talk about spirit. Because spirit is something bigger and beyond ourselves, because when we talk about spirit, we are fundamentally talking about mystery. In order to connect with it, in order to learn how to think about it, in order to engage with it, in order to orient our lives in and around it, we need form. We need form. We need language. We need ritual. We need tradition. We need frameworks. We need liturgy. We need practices. We need these forms to help make that connection happen, to help us understand and move into mystery. But also, and maybe even a little more importantly, we need form to help make the transformation that spirit leads us into. Forms help us access that life and world that spirit opens up for us. Yeah, form and spirit. Form and spirit will always go together. Wherever there is spirit, there will always be form. because form is how we come to understand, engage, and enter into mystery. Are you with me? Yeah, form and spirit. And we can see this relationship in stuff that we do together as a church. We can see this relationship of form and spirit even in our own personal practices. But we can also see it happening in this story that we heard. That wild, intriguing, violent, and scandalous story. Because 3,000 years ago, but still today if we're really going to be honest, there was this idea that spirit needed a place to live in order for us to engage with it and connect with it. And so humans built these things called temples, these literal homes where spirit would literally live that we could go into and we could have that connection. And around that one form of temple, all these other forms began to be developed and began to evolve. And so in Jesus' day, for example, there was this idea that when you went in the temple, you needed to bring God a gift. And so to make that happen inside the temple, you could go and buy an animal that you would sacrifice to God, and that's how they believed that connection was fostered and that transformation would occur. So you could go in, you could buy a dove, that was the cheapest thing generally. You could buy a cow, that was the most expensive thing. And if you didn't have the right kind of money, don't sweat it. Just go over to the money exchanger person. They can give you the right kind of money so you can go and make that connection happen. Those are the forms that existed to help that connection happen. There was also this idea that because what you were doing was so sacred, so special, you had to be presentable to go in. And so around the temple were all these different pools that depending on who you were, what your background was, or what your tribe was, you would go and prepare yourself for worship. You prepare yourself for that divine encounter. There was this idea as well that who you were actually had some spiritual value. So certain people were only allowed to get a certain distance in. The better you were seen, the closer to God you could get. And the worse you were seen, well, you had to kind of go and camp out back here and you weren't allowed in. Yeah, these are some of the forms that existed. These are the ways that people would practice their spirituality because these are the ways that they understood how the divine, the spirit, works. The whole thing kind of boiled down to this. In order to access spirit, in order to find life that is deep and meaningful, in order to get in on what God is doing, this is how you did it. You would go to God, which meant going into the temple. You would wash and get cleaned. You would buy a gift, and you would give it to God. Say what you want about it. That's just how it worked. And it's really, to be honest, not too different than how we practice our own spirituality in a lot of ways. In order to find and access spirit today, we go into a church. We put on certain clothes, we act a certain way, we do certain things, and all of it is geared towards fostering that connection. All of it is geared towards finding that life and that transformation. Yeah, spirit and form. Form and spirit, they always go together. And so when our story starts off, this is kind of how we can understand what is going on. It's what Jesus would have seen any other day he would have gone into the temple. It's what was going on in there for generations. So what he saw was nothing out of the ordinary. And so the question we ask has to become, what did Jesus see that made him act that way? What did he see that made him go and make a freaking whip and turn over all those tables and drive all those people out? What made him go in and tear the whole thing down? Because that's what he did. Let's be clear about that. He tore the whole thing down. It's not like he went in and tried to take out one form, one bad piece amongst some good pieces. It's not like he tried to democratize the whole thing by saying, you know what, cattle is a bit prohibitive, it's a bit exclusive, only some people can afford that, so let's get rid of the cows. Cows, you're gone. Money changers, you guys go too because you make it awkward for people to come in and access God. But everything else, it can stay. He didn't do that. That's not what he does. He doesn't throw out just a part of it. He throws out the whole thing. He brings the whole thing down. And this is huge. This is a huge deal. Every single form that was in there, he threw it all out. He brought down the whole system. This isn't Jesus just having a bad day. This isn't Jesus just kind of freaking out. This is an overturning of the very ways that people connected to and understood the divine. This was a throwing out of all the forms that people use to connect with spirit. So again, our question, why? What was going on in there that made Jesus bring the whole thing down? Now, this question has been answered in all kinds of compelling ways. There are all kinds of answers we could explore. But here's one way to look at it. Here's one reason why I think Jesus brought the whole thing down. And that reason is this. The forms, they weren't honoring the Spirit. The forms were fostering the wrong kind of life and the wrong kind of world. The forms that Jesus saw, the ideas, the practices, the rituals, the things that they were doing were causing the wrong kind of transformation. Yeah, the forms weren't honoring the Spirit. Because what happens when our forms insist that God is only found in one certain place? The world, it gets divided. It gets divided into holy space and common space. There are places where God is, and there are places where God is not. And what falls out of that? What does that then mean? That then means that God is only accessible in here, but not out there. That then means that how we behave in here and how we think in here is different than how we think and behave out there. That then means that what matters in there is different than what matters out here. That means what can happen in here, what is tolerated in here, is different than what can happen and is tolerated out there. Suddenly, because of that form, the world gets divided. It gets split up into what is holy and what is not holy. It gets split up into who and what is good and bad, into who and what belongs and what doesn't, into who and what is evil and good. And who gets to decide? And who gets to decide which is which? That's up to the people who control the space. That's up to the people who control the space where God lives. Yeah, our world gets divided. And what happens when other forms insist that we have to dress up for God, or insist that we have to earn God's favor by buying certain things depending on who we are and what we have and what our need is? What happens then? Well, we get divided. Parts of us are seen as good and lovable, and parts of us are seen as shameful and bad. Parts of us become hidden and kind of squirreled away, and parts of us we let be seen. Yeah, and we're also not really sure about where we stand with God. And so we get divided between peace and chaos, anxiety and calmness. We never know where we really stand with God. Yeah, we get divided. So no wonder Jesus freaked out. No wonder he threw the whole thing out. No wonder he brought it all down, because the truth is, forms that lead to a divided self and a divided world will never honor a spirit of peace and wholeness. Forms that lead to a life and world that's divided will never lead to a life and world of peace, justice, and harmony. They can't cause the kind of transformation that the Spirit is wanting us to have. The forms are incompatible with who the Spirit is. Jesus gets mad because the forms not only don't do that, they actually do the opposite. They create a different kind of life and world. They don't lead towards God. They lead away from God. Yeah. I think that's why Jesus did what he did. He looked at what was happening. He could see where it was all going. He could see the impact it was having on people, how it was shaping how they saw themselves and how they saw each other. He could feel the shame in the air. And in this act of holy mischief, In this act of righteous anger, of sacred protest, he tore the whole thing down. He drove it all out, as if to say that stuff you're doing is not doing what you think it's doing. You think it's going somewhere, it's taking you somewhere, it's only taking you further away. God's not in this. The Spirit isn't in this. This isn't honoring the Spirit. You won't find God here. You won't find the life and world you want here. It's taking you further away. All of this, it's got to go. It's got to go. Yeah, because that's the thing about form and spirit. That's the thing about all these practices we do to help us understand and connect with Spirit, connect with God. If they don't lead us towards Spirit, which is to say, if they don't lead us towards one another, if they don't lead us towards compassion and empathy, if they don't lead us towards justice, if they don't lead us towards being uncomfortable and being changed and transformed, if they don't lead towards the right kind of life and world, they have to go. They have to be thrown out. As comfortable, as familiar, and even as formative as they once may have been, if they don't move us, if they don't speak to us, if they hurt and exclude others, if they lead to divided selves in a divided world, if it's just something we do, if they don't match who we understand God to be and what we understand God to be about, the form's gotta go. We gotta throw them out. We gotta flip them over. Because while Spirit and form will always go together, while we always need them both, not all forms will work. Not all forms lead to Spirit. Some actually do the opposite. Some will lead us further away from the place that we are trying to go. Yeah, I think that's why Jesus freaked out. I think that's why he did what he did. Because his form didn't match the Spirit. And this is where we discover that rhythm that we talked about at the very beginning. This paradoxical, counterintuitive, but foundational rhythm that we can use, that we can enter into to discover a life that is more meaningful, more purposeful, that is deeper and fuller. This life, as we say here, that was always meant to be. And it's the rhythm that we see embodied in Jesus himself. This rhythm of dying and rising, this rhythm of death and resurrection. This rhythm that knows, that trusts, that it is through death, that it is only through death, that life can begin. That it is through letting things go, it is through letting things die, it is through throwing things out, through tearing it all down, that room can get made for something new. It's this rhythm that trusts and knows that even when we throw it all out, even when we tear it all down, even when we let it all go, we aren't left with nothing, because even then, Spirit still remains. God will always be. And because God is there, because Spirit is there, we can rise up. Again, we can rise up into something new. Yeah. Dying and rising, death and resurrection. That is the essential rhythm for life. That's how we become more and more human. That is how growth happens. It's how the whole thing works. Dying and rising, death and resurrection. And so here's where we get to that wildly hard but unavoidable question that this story asks us. Because we too are people who are looking to seek after God. We are looking to connect with Spirit. We're looking for the life and world and transformation Spirit opens up for us. And the wildly hard question this story asks us is, what tables do we need to flip over? What forms need to be thrown out? What do we need to tear down? Yeah, hard question, right? What tables need to be flipped over? And here's where it gets extra hard. Because we're not just talking about the tables that we've kind of pushed over in the corner that are dusty and we just do out of habit and have lost all meaning. We're not just talking about those tables. We're also talking about the tables that we still love. The tables we still sit at. The tables we've been doing for so long that we look forward to sitting at, that have so much meaning for us, but but the tables that also exclude and hurt others. The tables that lead to divided selves in a divided world. These tables that represent a God that once was, but no longer the God we know now. These tables that actually have the opposite effect than we want. These tables that keep us stuck, or worse, lead us away from where God has taken us. Yeah, those are the tables that the story says maybe you need to flip those over. Maybe those are the ones that you need to tear down. Yeah, hard, right? So hard, but such an important, such an essential question. What forms are getting in the way of our spirit? What forms are actually holding us back? What forms need to be flipped out, thrown out, and torn down? And as we answer that question, as we wrestle with that question, let's not forget about that sacred rhythm of dying and rising. Because what remains when we throw it all out? What helps us rise up again? Spirit. Even when they're all thrown out, even when we flip them all over, we are not alone. We don't lose everything, but spirit remains. Sometimes, maybe all the time, but sometimes the way to find spirit is to throw out the very thing we're doing to find it in the first place. Yeah. And so I'll leave you with that question. What needs to be flipped over? What forms are we mistaking for spirit? What is having the opposite effect? What is actually hurting us instead of helping us? What do we need to tear down? What do we need to tear down? Yeah. Wildly hard, but so fundamentally important. So as you go from this place and you begin to ask yourself that question, as we begin to wrestle with this question, especially as we look ahead to what is next, let's struggle well. Let's struggle well and remember that even when we tear it all down, spirit always remains. God will always be there. And it's through death, it's through tearing it all down that we can rise up again. And to that, my friends, we all say, Amen.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, yeah. Oh, everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Don't let anyone blow it out.
I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, don't let anyone blow it out. I'm gonna let it shine.
Don't let anyone blow it out.
I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No. I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No. I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, 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 let it shine.
So my friends, that is everything for this week. Thank you so much for being here. Seriously, thank you for tuning into this and doing this work together. Our hope and our prayer, as always, is that you leave here with something good. Something hopeful, something challenging, something inspiring, something to remind you that you are good and loved and that you are enough, and something to help you keep doing that work of becoming more and more human and alive in this world. Before you head out to whatever is next or join us on our Zoom call, check out all the links below. We'd love for you to see the things that our church is doing that you can get in on. There's lots of good stuff coming up. We'd love for you to donate to our church. If you are picking up what we're putting down, if you are benefiting from this work, if you believe in the work that we are doing, we'd love for you to donate to us. It all goes to help us do this work of fostering hope, meaning, purpose, and connection. And hopefully we'll see you back next week. Next week, we are having a special communion service, so make sure you bring some food and something to drink. And we are celebrating the fact that even though it's been one entire year since we started doing online services, guess what? We're still here. We are still here, and we're going to have a great time celebrating that achievement together. So we'll see you next week at that. But for now, my friends, as always, may you go in peace, may you go in love, may you go and do it loudly. Amen.